Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Sure appreciate y'all joining us. And my goodness, Sonara and I really learned so much, and we getting ready for our podcast to share things with you guys. And um, we get excited about the things that we've learned and we can share, and so appreciative of all the things that the Lord shows us out of His Word. So we hope y'all are getting it too. So where's my cove? There she is.
Here
Hey,
I am.
Hey.
Hey.
Well,
Howdy.
Last week we, based on feedback we got from some of our regulars, we gave y'all a break for Super Bowl. Some of you were very glad, and some of you were very sad. So don't know which is which, but boy, that almost wasn't worth it for those that won. I know you're glad you got the break, but the ones that lost, Lord have mercy, we could have been doing 20,000 other things, couldn't we? So anyway,
I guess you're giving away which side you were rooting for.
Well, no. I'm not saying who I was pulling for. I actually was pulling for both of them. Let's just leave it at that. I
thought the commercials were better. The commercials were better this year. They weren't perfect. There was still some woke stuff in there, but my goodness, the commercials were somewhat better.
They were. There, some of them had.
I'm always just there for the commercials, and the snacks.
Some of them were had a lot of humor in them this time. So I'm like you. I thought the commercials were several degrees better than in recent years past. But anyway, we're glad y'all are back with us. We're going to get kicked off because we got a lot to cover, and hope y'all learn a lot tonight. And we know we sure did getting ready for tonight. So go ahead, sweetie, take off.
We learned so much that we could never put in here. But we've been in the book of Kings, 1st and 2nd Kings, for a while now. And we've kind of been going down the line, taking it as it comes. But we kind of realized that there are a lot of these stories, the individual stories, that we're going to actually study when we study the prophets. And we just tonight thought that maybe we would do an overview of Kings and kind of wrap up Kings tonight. And then as we go through the prophets that served and ministered these kings, we'll find out, more details. But to just get the big picture is kind of where we're going with this tonight. The key events. Go ahead, Key.
Well, I was just going to say, tonight it's going to vary from the 30,000 foot view to the 3,000 foot view to the walking the streets of Jerusalem view.
Okay, well, we got all views, several views, but key events. I guess this would be what you say, the 30,000 mile view, 30,000
view.
Yeah, it would be the three major things that are going to happen in 1st and 2nd Kings, as in 931 BC, that the kingdom is going to split into north and south, so Israel and Judah. But, we did a good bit of studying on Saul and David before this. Well, that was a united kingdom. That was when it was one nation. It does split here, and we start seeing, we've got a lot we're going to get into there. But, in 722, remember, we're counting down, Assyria conquers Israel, which is the northern kingdom, and then Judah actually survives until 586 BC, when Babylon destroys Jerusalem and the southern kingdom falls. So that would be the three main. If you had to really back up and look at all these chapters, that's the guts. That's the very guts of it. But now we can look and see kind of, and you've done this before, but I was able to do these slides that give us these charts that give us, kind of a view of all the kings. And
And I think
so
you did a great job on these slides. So,
we can see Solomon, first of all, that is the United Kingdom. That's not the divided kingdom. The last king with the United Kingdom was Solomon. And we remember that Solomon built the temple. He was known for his wisdom. We also know that he was known for his stupidity and all his wives and idolatry at the end of his life. But that was the last United Kingdom king. He had Saul, David, and then his son Solomon. And then that's when the kingdom becomes divided, and you've got Judah and you've got Israel. So here you can just look through here and, look at these. It gives you kind of an overview of what each king was, the times they served. I've got some more details later we'll look at, but you can also kind of see what they were known for, or what the Bible tells us about them. You'll even notice down here, Zimri was reigns for 7 days and committed suicide. I mean, so there's a lot of minor kings in here. There were some good kings. Most of those would have been in Judah. But we'll get into that in just a second. Let's go through these slides. But then the conflict, of course, starts between Israel and Judah during these years. And so you can see some of these. You might recognize some of these that we've given some details about. I think we're going to talk about Jehu a little bit. Remember Ahab. Let's see. Let's move on. Then the last strong kings before the decline are listed here. This is all in order. Keith, any of those that jump out at you that you want to talk about? Right.
Oh yeah, we'll cover them later.
Get into those. We'll get.
Yeah,
into
just wanted to let everybody know these are really good slides, really good
timelines.
Timelines, yeah.
And the biblical references of where, if you wanted to know about Zechariah, the king of Israel, you can go to 2 Kings chapter 15.
Exactly.
So if you ever wanted to copy these down for any reason, you could. The fall of Israel and Judah, one of the ones, that I want to talk about, and I know you do too, Manasseh. The last king of Judah is Zedekiah. So there's the fall of Jerusalem. I want to pull out just a little bit to show you where in the timeline Jehu was, because I want to talk about him for just a second. And, he was the one that killed Ahab's family and destroyed Baal worship. Here we go. Just him. Those are his years. That's where you'll find him in the Bible. The Bible says in chapter 9, Elisha sends a prophet to secretly anoint Jehu as king of Israel, commissioning him to destroy Ahab's house. And Jehu swiftly kills King Joram of Israel and King Uzziah of Judah. When he arrives in Jezreel, everybody's going to remember Jezebel. Jezebel mocks him from a window, but at his command, her eunuchs throw her down. Her eunuchs had no love for her. She dies, and dogs devour her body. The long story of that is she falls down and dies, and they go in and have a feast. And in the middle of the feast, he said, "Look, y'all go out there and bury her. She was a queen and all that. We really need to give her a burial." But by the time they got back out there, the dogs had devoured her body, which fulfilled Elijah's prophecy. And so his rise marks the beginning of the judgment against Ahab's descendants, which goes on and on and on and on. So Jehu did destroy Baal worship in Israel. However, and this is something that kind of got me turning on this entire idea of how we should wrap up the book of Kings, is that, however, he did not turn away from the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit, the worship of the golden calves at Bethel and Dan. And Keith, I know you and I can't forget this, and I hope everybody remembers, but why don't you tell them a little bit about Bethel and Dan and the setup of worship in those places of the golden calves? Could you do that?
Well, yeah, Jeroboam, you remember, it was Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Rehoboam was Solomon's son, and he tried to rule the United Kingdom after King Solomon died, but the northern 10 tribes rebelled, and they basically drafted Jeroboam to be their king. And Jeroboam, all of that was prophesied by God for Jeroboam's benefit. And again, I remind everybody that we've studied this before. Jeroboam's prophecy, the covenant with God, was a bilateral covenant. It was not a unilateral covenant where God declared something and he stuck to it, no matter what. That was a unilateral covenant that God made with mankind in various forms. But the covenant with Jeroboam was a bilateral covenant, which meant it was conditional. And if Jeroboam had done thus and so, then the Lord promised to do this, to do that, to keep him in power, to let his lineage stay on the throne. And there were several promises made to Jeroboam. But I mean, as soon as he confirmed his power over the 10 tribes, the northern 10 tribes, it went to hell in a handbasket.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and you want me to cover
what I really wanted you to talk about instead of that
was the two calves, the two golden calves.
Yeah, that's
well.
right.
One of the things that we also studied about Jeroboam was he was very paranoid, and he was very afraid that if his worshipers, his people, went all the way to Jerusalem, which Jerusalem by that time was the center of worship, supposedly, that if they went all the way to Jerusalem and they were listening to the preachers in around Jerusalem and seeing how things were going in Jerusalem, they may turn against him and overthrow him and want to reunite with the southern kingdom again. And so he set up two places of worship, and this is where and oh my gosh, I mean, when you finish out the book of 2 Kings, just about every king of the north, the one thing they never corrected was the sins of Jeroboam. The sin of Jeroboam was that he set up two golden calves. You know what that's reminiscent of, and we'll cover it a lot later. But one was at Dan, which is up north, just south of Caesarea Philippi, Mount Hermon. And the other was at Bethel, which was only a few miles before you get to the border between Judah and Israel.
So he set up a worship center.
He set up two worship centers, and
but they weren't to Jehovah God. They were to
Hathor.
Yeah,
the cow goddess.
Which he contributed. He said that your God who brought you out of Egypt, Hathor.
Your gods. These are the gods that brought you out of Egypt, which was just an out and out lie to the people. But that's what let me say this. If you finish reading the rest of 2 Kings about any reference to the northern kingdom, they were ready to receive it. They were ready to believe it.
Yeah.
We've already talked about the stuff we've studied about the Hebrews while they were under bondage in Egypt. They very quickly forgot all about Jehovah. They were very pagan while they were in Egypt. And so the first sign of trouble, I mean, it didn't matter how many miracles God performed for them. First sign of trouble, first thing they want to do is erect a golden calf, start worshiping again. But there was a reason for that.
But the erection of it, where he built it, was to prevent. It was kind of a deterrent to losing his constituency.
Yes.
He did not want anybody to get down there in Jerusalem and under the influence of God-fearing good people be swayed to say, you can't live up there and be worshiping all those idols. He was afraid he'd lose people. Mm-hmm. And he was just afraid, just attrition-wise, that they would go down there and wouldn't have the money to get back, whatever. He didn't want them having to travel all the way down there. So he just set up a big worship center.
And that wasn't all that he did. He basically exiled the Levite priesthood and no longer let them be the priest in the northern kingdom. He basically priestships were basically for sale. Whoever wanted to be a priest in the north, well, he would recognize them, and that didn't turn out well. So you had mass migrations in both directions. The ones in the south who wanted to worship, the pagan gods, well, they migrated north, and the Levites and the true worshipers of Jehovah who were living in the north, well, they moved, they migrated to the area around Jerusalem. And Rehoboam, the first couple of kings, Rehoboam initially gave them land around Jerusalem to settle on. Mm-hmm. And so that pretty much sealed the deal as far as the spiritual division of the northern and the southern kingdom.
Yep. It occurred to me, when we were looking at this, the sins of Jeroboam, and that is a phrase that you hear over and over again,
Repeatedly.
Throughout the history of these kings. And it's almost like if this was modern day, they'd say, well, he was pulling a Jeroboam. That's how catchphrase this almost was to signify causing the people to worship idols.
Yeah.
And it's used in a lot. We see that several times. Let's see. I think this next slide is about following the sins of Jeroboam in the 23rd year of Joash, son of Ahaziah, the king of Judah. Jehoahaz, son of Jehu, became the king of Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. And it says in the Verse 2, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord by following the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, which he had caused Israel to commit. The sins, we know what that is now. The sins are the worshiping of these idols, and he did not turn away from them. So the Lord's anger burned against Israel, and for a long time he kept them under the power of Hazael, the king of Aram, and Ben-Hadad, his son. Then Jehoahaz sought the Lord's favor, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw how severely the king of Aram was opposing Israel. The Lord provided a deliverer for Israel, and they escaped from the power of Aram. So the Israelites lived in their own homes as they had before, but they did not turn away from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he had caused Israel to commit. They continued in them. Also, the Asherah pole remained standing in Samaria. You just want to say, how stiff-necked can people be? There are some other interesting passages that I was looking at, and this is all continuing to talk about these kings. I kind of highlighted down in this first passage, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but not as his father David had done. In everything, he followed the example of his father Joash. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burn incense there. So these places are still sitting there with people going to them. Then another, after the kingdom was firmly in his grasp, he executed the officials who had murdered his father, the king. Yet he did not put the children of the assassins to death in accordance with what is written in the book of Moses, where the Lord commanded parents not to be put to death for their children, nor their children for their parents. Each will die for their own sin. All this took place, Keith, because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them up out of Egypt from under the power of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And that's in 2 Kings 17:7. And then there is a list in the scripture of all the things they did. They worshiped other gods. They followed the practices of pagan nations, building high places, which we've all come to know as, for some reason, up on the hills were the pagan temples and, worship of little g gods. Asherah poles, we know what that was. We've studied that. They burned incense to other gods. They did not trust God. They followed worthless idols and became worthless. They imitated the nations around them against the Lord's orders. They bowed down to the starry host. We know what that was. They sacrificed their children in the fire, Molech. They practiced divination, sought omens, and sold themselves to do evil. So all these things are listed in the list of things that it says all this took place because the Israelites had sinned against the Lord their God who had brought them up out of Egypt. And I wonder if anybody else is kind of seeing this pattern here. But 2 Kings 17, the Israelites persisted in all the sins, here it is, of Jeroboam, and did not turn away from them until the Lord removed them from his presence, as he had warned through all his servants, the prophets. So the people of Israel were taken from their homeland into exile in Assyria, and they are still there. So at the time of this writing, they were still in Assyria. 2 Kings, they would not listen, however, but persisted in their former practices. We know what those were. Even while these people were worshiping the Lord, they were serving their idols. And to this day, their children and grandchildren continue to do as their ancestors did. What?
You need to understand that at this point, what they're talking about is the people who were left in the northern kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
The Assyrians did not take everybody to Assyria. It was like right close to 30,000 people. They left the poorest of the poor of the Jews where they lived, where they were conquered. And then the Assyrians brought in people from foreign countries to basically inhabit the place where the Jews were taken out of. And so you had the lower class, the poorest of the poor, still there. These foreigners were brought in, and the reason you need to know this story, because this is the breeding ground of why the Samaritans in Jesus's day were so hated by the pureblood Jews who weren't exiled at this time, but who were exiled in the Babylonian captivity, a long time later. But this is what fomented the hatred and the enmity with the Samaritans, is because the Samaritans were basically Jewish people by heritage that had intermarried with the invading tribal people that the Assyrians brought into this area of Samaria and Galilee and that region of
and
the
adopted their pagan practices.
And adopted their pagan practices.
Just a big old homogenous mix of worship everybody.
Kind of like America before January 20th. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I stuck this in here because I just want us to think about this for a second. But we all know the 10 Commandments, but there is a lot of focus from all of us on not murdering, not committing adultery, not stealing, lying, coveting. We do tend to really celebrate those sins, but there's a reason why the first 2 commandments are there. You shall have no other gods before me.
For I am a jealous God.
You shall not make for yourself any carved image or idol, nor bow down to them or serve them. That's the first 2 of the 10 commandments. What do we see all of Israel and Judah doing over and over again? We see them having gods before him and making carved images and idols and bowing down to them and worshiping them. God's not happy. This is first. This is first in everybody's relationship to God. This. Before we get into anything else, we are into this. Now, the kings of Israel, I want to go back through this really quick. This is the United Kingdom before the split, Saul, David, and Solomon. And I wanted to just accent for a second how long people were in power, because it's interesting to me. So Saul reigned 40 years, David 40 years, and then Solomon 40 years. Of course, Saul and David are in the book of Samuel. They're not in the book of Kings. But those are the first three of the united Israel. Then we get into the southern kingdom. I highlighted a few here, but look, you can go down in this second column, and you can see 17, 3, 41, Asa. Jehoshaphat was 25 years. Jehoram, 8. 1, 6. Joash was 40 years. And you come down to Manasseh, 55 years. All of these kings, except maybe one or two, which were 3 months, had at least years. Now this is the southern kingdom. Now remember, Keith was just telling you that the southern kingdom was, even though they were bad, I mean, they were more aligned toward, if they had a good king at all, it was going to be in Judah. I'll show you that later. The kings of Israel, which were more because, well, it's not more because they fell quicker, but as far as the timeline goes, we'll look at that. You can see that there are people 7 days, there are usurpers, there are people 1 month, 6 months. They had some turnover here, okay? They had some turnover because
they couldn't keep the lineage going either. The lineage would be judged because of how bad the paternal head of that particular family was. God would usually issue an edict of there's no way that his lineage would stay on the throne in the northern kingdom. Right. Now, these were all Jewish kings. I mean,
yes,
they were from the tribes, but God wasn't going to bless them because they were like super sinful.
So here's a side-by-side comparison. On the left are the kings of Judah. On the right are the kings of Israel. And these are contemporary with each other, meaning, as they're across from each other, that's who was on the throne at the times they were on the throne. And so, for example, you see when Manasseh was on the throne for 55 years, during part of that time, Hosea was on there. Then you can also see that Israel is going to fall to Assyria in 722 BC, whereas Judah falls to Babylon later in 586 BC. But that just that's just good information to kind of get an idea of who was on the throne when, who was his contemporary counterpart king for, the different, for Judah and Israel, if that's interesting to anybody. This is a color-coded, and of course this is subjective, but just basically going off scripture, that the green dots would more or less represent the good and faithful kings, which were, if you'll notice, mostly in Judah, all in Judah. The yellow, mixed regions, some good, some bad. The red is just flat out evil. Most all you see of Israel is red, except for a few of the gray, which were usurpers or very short reigns. They were in power so short a time, there was no telling what kind of king they were going to be. You see, one was 7 days, one was 6 months, one was a month.
One murdered the king and couldn't even get out of town before he was caught and dealt with.
Right. I think Zimri committed suicide, I think.
I believe you're right.
Mm-hmm. So you can see there that even though, but I can tell you right now, even the ones that they have a green dot by their name, there was no one ever after really David that was a king after God's own heart, that ruled the way that he did, with embracing God as his God. And they all have little things you'll find out about them if you go and study them. Now, one of the things that we will do is, we're telling you that, kings and the prophets, they are all, Here, let's go to the next slide. I think I have a slide on this. Well, let's do the final fall of Judah. That was the last king, and what caused that. Key events leading to the fall of Judah. Jehoiakim's rebellion in 2 Kings 24. He initially served Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, but later rebelled. And this led to Babylon attacking Judah. And then Jehoiachin's surrender. After his death, his son, who's named almost exactly the same but spelled different, so confusing, surrendered to Babylon in 597. Nebuchadnezzar deported him along with many leaders and skilled workers to Babylon. But Zedekiah's rebellion, this is just a little bit more because Nebuchadnezzar installed him as a puppet king, meaning he's all his actions are, his strings are pulled by Nebuchadnezzar. He just put him in there. But he also rebelled, refusing to submit to Babylon. So we have the siege of Jerusalem. And in response to that rebellion, he laid siege to Jerusalem for nearly 2 years, causing extreme famine. And then the destruction of Jerusalem, you read in 2 Kings 25, where Babylon breached Jerusalem's walls and burned the Temple of Solomon, destroyed the city, and took most of the people into exile. Zedekiah tried to flee, but he was captured, forced to watch his sons executed, and then he was blinded and taken to Babylon. And that is the end of Judah.
The southern kingdom.
The southern kingdom. Well, the northern kingdom was already gone 200 years before. But, the final straw was the direct cause of Judah's final fall was Zedekiah's rebellion against Nebuchadnezzar, despite the warnings from the prophet Jeremiah. And this rebellion brought about Babylon's full destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, marking the complete collapse of Judah as a nation. Now, Keith, I want to read this, and you help me because I'm having trouble understanding this. Jeremiah 27:12-15. It says warnings from the prophet Jeremiah. So I wanted to see what that said. So here's what it is. It says, I gave the same message. It's Jeremiah speaking and recalling the same message that he gave to Zedekiah, the king of Judah. I said, bow your neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon. Serve him and his people, and you will live. Why will you and your people die by the sword, famine, and plague, with which the Lord has threatened any nation that will not serve the king of Babylon? Okay, I'm going to stop right there. That doesn't make sense to me. It says, do not listen to the words of the prophets who say to you, you will not serve the king of Babylon, for they are prophesying lies to you. I have not sent them, declares the Lord. They are prophesying lies in my name. Therefore, I will banish you, and you will perish, both you and the prophets who prophesy to you. Why were they supposed to bow their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon? Do you know?
Well, this is one of those situations where it was if you will do so-and-so, this will happen. But being God and I'm outside of time, I already know what the end result's going to be. And the end result is going to be the judgment on Judah, which God pronounced back in 2 Kings.
Okay. They were supposed to bend the knee to the king of Babylon, but he wasn't.
If you want to live.
But he wasn't godly. I mean, he didn't worship Jehovah. So
no.
He was just saying, y'all have gone so far down the rabbit hole here that there's no getting out of this now. You're either going to have to serve the king of Babylon and go be enslaved by the king of Babylon, or you're going to die. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bend the knee.
Right. There you go. Now, I thought this was very interesting, and this will lead into what we're going to start studying after this. And I said skip this slide. There we go. This is, again, Judah, the southern kingdom, Israel, the northern kingdom on the right. And we have the prophets in Judah for these kings on both sides. I was just interested to know as we study the prophets themselves and the books, especially like Isaiah, Jeremiah, all that, when we study these, who were the kings that they were ministering to? And so this is a good list of that. And that gives us an idea. We will get into this a whole lot more as we move on and go through and study the prophets. Keith, do you remember the song that we used to sing, Take Me Into the Holy of Holies? And we used to quote from Isaiah, a scripture. And if you'll look up there about halfway down on the left, Uzziah, and Isaiah is his prophet. Do you remember it said, in the year that King Uzziah died? That is the first part of that thing. And it says, take the coal, touch my lips. Here I am. He said, send me. That was Isaiah saying that, remember? And there it is right there. King Uzziah, Isaiah. I just thought that was interesting to remember that song.
Well, and that's, a lot of people don't think in terms of the hymns we sing. Some of the hymns are so scriptural, it's not even funny. And, we're, for those of us that were raised up in church, we sing the hymns by heart. But one of the things I was very blessed was we had a song director one time named Frank Stittle, and he didn't want you to just learn the music and the singing to make a good showing of it on Sunday morning. He would teach us as the choir the importance and significance of all the words of any particular song that we were singing, as a special. And I learned to take the words of songs much more seriously, number one, to study the meaning of them, the intent of it, and the background for them, just because of that great choir leader, minister of music that we had, that I had the blessing of being in his choir under.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
I really do appreciate that song, and I know which one you're referring to. I wish you'd sing it for everybody.
I can't right now.
Okay.
I can't right now. Yeah, that's a great song. But insights into the prophets, Elijah and Elisha, here's another 30,000 foot view, were dominant prophets in Israel, speaking against the corruption of Ahab and his descendants, Ahab and Jezebel. Remember that? And then Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Micah played major roles in Judah before their exile. Hosea, Amos, and Jonah, remember Jonah in the whale, were active in Israel's final years before Assyrian captivity. Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel served during Judah's last days and the exile in Babylon. You remember they were exiled to Babylon. Remember they were thrown into the fire. They were thrown into the lion's den. All those things that happened to Daniel and all the prophecy that happened there. We want to study that at another time. But there you go. Keith, I know you have some things that you wanted to kind of zero in on. So we'll let you do that.
Well, let's make sure I got the right one. There we go. 2 Kings 13. How many of you know about the miracle that happened after Elisha died? Turn your attention to 2 Kings 13, starting at verse 18. Let's see. No, I'm sorry. 20. Elisha died and was buried. Now, Moabite raiders used to enter the country every spring. Once, while the Israelites were burying a man, suddenly they saw a band of raiders. So they threw the man's body into Elisha's tomb. When the body touched Elisha's bones, the man came to life and stood up on his feet. How many of you knew that was even in the Bible?
That's something.
How many of you even knew that was in the Bible? Now, I'm not saying this to put anybody down. I'm not saying this to shame anybody. But we've told you so many times, and it's our opinion. You can't study your scripture enough. And I have conversations with people and things that Sonar and I try to bring out. And so many times when we mention something, they say, I didn't know that was in our Bible. I didn't know that was in our Bible. Where's that at? I never heard that. And, it's very common. And I just want to remind everybody, the statistic, you've heard me say this at least, I don't know, at least twice, if not three times, that statistically speaking, that if the only time you are ever exposed to God's word, talking about the Old Testament, New Testament, is Sunday morning, Sunday night, or Wednesday night, then by the time you reach your life expectancy of a man or a woman, you will have been exposed to less than 4% of what's in the Bible. Now, another thing that Sonar and I hear from time to time is, why are we trying to teach the Old Testament as thoroughly as we do? And, why aren't we, all anybody really needs is the New Testament. And our response is, well, you headed in the right direction. All anybody really needs is salvation in Jesus Christ. And
that's true. That is true.
Truly is in the New Testament.
Yeah.
But to understand so much about the New Testament, if you study the Old Testament, so much about the New Testament comes alive. It's illuminated. It's expanded. It has stronger legs put up under it, if you know the Old Testament. And so,
I mean, as far as it's like the foundation for understanding Jesus and his ministry. It's, yes, you can come in later in history and just know that he has redeemed you and he saved you, by his sacrifice, that, your faith and acceptance and repentance is all that's required. That is true. But it's kind of like once you get there, you want to know more. I feel like you want to know, where did this go? How did we get here? How did we get to this place? And
exactly.
That is what the Old Testament is. This is how we got there. This is how we got to the place where God said, I'm going to have to go down there. I'm going to have to go down there and save them.
And you think of how many times Jesus is referring to God the Father. The Jews referring to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so much of what we can learn and understand about God himself and the spiritual realm comes from the Old Testament. It doesn't come from the New Testament. I challenged somebody the other day, won't talk about demons. I said, well, first of all, go and study every scripture that makes a reference to an unclean spirit, or in some cases it's out and out called a demon in the New Testament, almost always referring to either direct contact, and if not direct contact, certainly submission to and dominion by Jesus over these spiritual entities, whatever they are. Well, and I've said this before, the Jews were not surprised. The disciples were not surprised. Jesus was not surprised by, these spiritual beings that were, without bodies, and they had certain attributes, could do certain things, could not do certain things. But, studying them, you can get an idea of but where did they come from? Well, the Hebrews and the Jews, especially Paul, when he's writing in his letters, and he's like Ephesians 6:12, I think it is, about, we don't wrestle with flesh and blood. Well, he knew what the background was. Well, where did the background come from? There was no New Testament at the time Paul was writing this. Where did the background come from? The Old Testament. all of the Jewish teachings that were derived from the Old Testament. And so that's why Sonara and I are saying, we can learn so much about God and his creation and the spiritual realm that we spent so much time studying 2 weeks ago. All of this we can learn from the Old Testament that prepares us to study the New Testament. In Jesus's place as the human Jesus in it, the human that was imbued with such supernatural power and that connection to the Father. And then the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit, Jesus went up and the Spirit came down, and all those manifestations. Well, what's the back? It's all in the Old Testament. So that's why we're saying study the Old Testament, and you will be much better prepared to learn the New Testament.
And just learning, just being kind of hit in the face over and over again during this, research, the sins of Jeroboam, and the fact that was a major deal, that people were turned away from God being their God. God is a jealous God. He wants your undivided worship. It doesn't mean spread it around to everything. He wants it to be him and him alone. And if it weren't for we have a lot of people that challenge us that, there was no such thing as little g gods. If that was true, why would the very first commandment be, thou shalt have no other gods before me? There are spiritual entities that are created beings by God that he has used, here in the divine council. We've studied that, and to be watchers, and he put them over the nations, and that all went wrong. Not that God was, doing it wrong. He's just a God of many, many chances. And if you don't believe that, he sent his son. He sent Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Keith. I know you got more you want to get to, and we're running out of time.
Okay. All right. Menahem, son of Gadai, 752 BC. This is from 2 Kings 15. And I bring him up for a special reason. Shallum, the son of Jabesh, became king in the 39th year of Uzziah, king of Judah, and he reigned a full month in Samaria. For Menahem, the son of Gadi, went up from Tirzah, came to Samaria, and struck Shallum, the son of Jabesh, in Samaria and killed him. There you go. Ruthless usurper. And he reigned in his place. Then from Tirzah, Menahem attacked Tiphsah, all who were there in its territory, because they did not surrender. Therefore he attacked it. All the women there who were with child, he ripped open. The guy was ruthless. The guy was ruthless. This is how evil he was.
This was king of Judah.
No, king of Israel.
Okay, king of Israel.
King of Israel.
Oh my goodness. Okay, in the year that Uzziah, king of Judah. Okay, I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Remember, oftentimes when you're reading the book of 2 Kings, it's sometimes it will give you the timeline of a southern king in relation to the northern king.
Which is what I was trying to do in my chart.
Right.
It's confusing.
And then also vice versa. It'll give you the timeline of a northern king in relation to the timeline of a southern king, of a contemporary southern king.
Needless to say, he had a red dot by his name. He was an evil king.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Anyway, let's see why this one is significant. In the 39th year of Azariah, king of Judah, Menahem, the son of Gadai, became king over Israel and reigned 10 years in Samaria. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart all his days from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. Well, there's it. What'd you call it a while ago, Sonora? Anyway, that's the refrain that you hear all the time when it refers to a northern king. They might clean up this, they might clean up that, but almost universally, they left the sins of Jeroboam institutionalized in the northern kingdom. Now let's go on. Pul, that's the name used in the King James, the New King James, and a few other translations. But it's really the same king of Assyria that goes by the name of Tiglath-Pileser the third. Came against the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver in his hand, that his support might be with him to strengthen the kingdom under his control. Remember, he was a usurper, and usurpers are almost always looking over their shoulder, and they're always wondering where, okay, if I'm a ruthless usurper, there's probably somebody waiting around the corner to knock me out of my place. And so he basically heavily taxed the northern kingdom and paid tribute to the Assyrian king to have the Assyrian king on his side. And I'm not saying Syrian, I'm saying Assyrian king on his side. Okay. And again, this is still well before the northern kingdom fell. Who's next? Pekah. Now, Menahem basically kept the Assyrian king at bay. Well, guess what happened under Pekah, son of Remaliah, 740? He did evil, suffered the first partial exile to Assyria. In the 52nd, this is 2 Kings 15 also. Pekah, the son of Remaliah, became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned 20 years. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam. Sins of Jeroboam. In the days of Pekah.
It's like something in society can become, or a culture can become so well known that you could almost say, well, he pulled a Jeroboam.
Yeah.
And people would know what that meant. And this appears so many times in the scripture that you start feeling like that was what this was. That's all people had to say, the sins of Jeroboam, and everybody knew what they were talking about.
Well, here's something else I want y'all to understand. Did y'all know that there was a partial exile of the northern kingdom before tonight? Did y'all know that? Mm-hmm. Well, in verse 29, it says, in the days of Pekah, king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, came and took Ijon, Abel, Beth-Makkah, Genoa, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali. And he carried them captive to Assyria. How many of you knew that there was actually two conquests of the northern kingdom before tonight? Oh my goodness. Ahaz, son of Jotham. This is in Judah. This is 2 Kings 16. Ahaz did not do what was right in the sight of the Lord. Now, we're talking about Judah. That's the southern kingdom, as his father David had done. But he walked in the way of the kings of Israel. This guy in the southern kingdom was so well known for being bad that they said he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. Indeed, he made his son pass through the fire. What does that mean, Sonar?
That means he sacrificed him to Molech.
Yes, it does.
Or Baal, either one.
He sacrificed and burned incense on high places and under every green tree. The Hebrew for the Hebrew for that last phrase literally means all the trees that were decorated for Asherah or Ashtoreth, depending on what name you want for her. Then Rezin, king of Syria, and Pekah, son of Remaliah, king of Israel, came up to Jerusalem to make war, and they besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. At that time, Rezin, king of Syria, captured Elath for Syria and drove the men of Judah from Elath. Then the Edomites went to Elath and dwell there to this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and save me from the hand of the king of Syria, from the hand of the king of Israel, who rise up against me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house, and sent it as a present to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria heeded him For the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and took it and carried its people captive to Kir and killed Rezin. The kingdom of Assyria was a bad kingdom at this time, very powerful. They were also very ruthless. If you study the Mesopotamian historical documents about the things that he would do to defeated people, to defeated tribes, and so he very warlike, very warlike. I'm not talking about Ahaz. I'm talking about the king of Syria. What was his name? Tiglath-Pileser III.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what was next? Hoshea, son of Elah, he did evil. This is back in the northern kingdom. Conspired with Egypt to rebel against Assyria to end the paying of tribute. He was the last king of Israel. Israel was exiled to Assyria fully and finally and completely under Hoshea. And he did evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel who were before him. Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, came up against him, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute money. And the king of Assyria uncovered a conspiracy by Hoshea, for he had sent messengers to So, the king of Egypt, and brought no tribute to the king of Assyria as he had done year by year. Therefore the king of Assyria shut him up and bound him in prison. Now the king of Assyria went throughout all the land and went up to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of King Hoshea, the king of Assyria took Samaria and carried Israel away to Assyria and placed them in Halah, and by the Habor, the river of Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. Now, this phrase right here that is italicized and underlined, it's very important to know what that means. And what that means is basically in a west to east pattern, he deposited the northern tribes people that he took away. And like I said, it was about 30,000 of them altogether. And he would spread them out, just like I told you a while ago when Sonara was doing her part. When the king of Assyria replaced the exiled Jews with people from foreign lands, well, they came from everywhere. They didn't all come from one place because he didn't want them ganging up together to rebel. And so they were naturally going to be distrustful of each other. They may not have even spoken the same language. None of that. Well, going in the other direction, the exiled Hebrews from the northern kingdom, when they were heading to Assyria, he would split them up, and some of them went to the eastern side of the kingdom of Assyria, which I'll show you here in just a minute. But that's why that last phrase there in verse 5 is important. All right, here's a map of the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire, remember, centered over the city of Nineveh. And when I say,
so is the Assyrian Empire the red part?
Well, no, that was the center of it. What they controlled, the empire, is shown in that rust color,
yellow ochre color. Okay,
yeah, you know the colors better than I do, but yeah, that's all of what the Assyrian Empire controlled at its height. And remember, we studied this before. There's Nineveh, and due south and a little bit east is Babylon. Well, at this point in time, Babylonia was under the control of the Assyrians. Okay, the Babylonians had not rebelled at this time and threw off the yoke of the Assyrians and defeated them and then started taking over the Assyrian Empire. That hadn't happened yet. But what I wanted to show you is you got to remember now, coming from the area between Jerusalem and Tyre and Damascus, that triangle right there, okay, that was the area of the northern kingdom. Well, he took them and basically spread them from west to east up there in the upper Euphrates, through Nineveh, all the way over to the area that's not shown as being part of the Assyrian. Right at that eastern edge, that's where some of those exiled Jews ended up. okay, because those were the cities of the Medes. And it was all strategically done. It was for the purposes of not letting them be in one place, because they could be a thorn in his side if they had the ability to gather together and connive and conspire and plan and
So if you can't divide them like God did by language, you could divide them by distance.
By distance and making sure that you didn't put you kept them in smaller groups, smaller divisions. And in a foreign land, they didn't know the roads, they didn't know the terrain, they didn't know languages, so they were in a very, very bad way. But it was by design. It was that's how the Assyrian handled the defeated the people and the tribes that they defeated and conquered. Now, here's what I want you to read. Now, this is an inscription of Sargon II. He's the father of Sennacherib. In the beginning of my reign, when I took my seat on the royal throne and was crowned with a lordly crown, the Sumerians, who agreed with another hostile king not to continue their slavery and not to deliver tribute, and who started hostility, I fought with them and completed their defeat. 27,280 people who lived therein with their chariots I carried off as spoil. 50 chariots for my royal bodyguard I mustered from among them, and the rest of them I settled in the midst of Assyria. The city of Samaria I resettled and made it greater than before. People of the lands conquered by my own hand I brought there.
Where is this inscription? Where is this inscription?
It's in the records.
Is it a tablet? Is it a cuneiform? Whatever.
It was probably on a tablet somewhere, or an inscription on stone.
Okay.
Okay, but that's the father of Sennacherib. Okay. And this is 2 Kings 17. And the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the people of Israel. And at the beginning of their dwelling there, they did not fear the Lord. But every nation still made gods of its own and put them in the shrines of the high places that the Samaritans had made, every nation in the cities in which they lived. The men of Babylon made Succoth-Banat. Well, that was a Babylonian god. The men of Cuth made Nergal. All of these names that you're reading here, these are well-known, well-documented pagan gods from the Near East.
So basically what it's saying is they moved in, he moved new people in, and they brought their own gods and filled the temples that had been built by them with these pagan gods.
Yes. And what happened is it just caused confusion and turmoil. And so the king, and it's in 2 Kings chapter 17, but there's a verse that says he took a priest from the Jews and sent him back to, I'm sure he didn't go, by himself. He probably had an entourage, back to Samaria to help the people who were still there. Well, all that did was remind them of Jehovah God, who was supposed to have been their God all along. And this is what it says. So they feared the Lord, but also served their own gods after the manner of the nations from among whom they had been carried away. To this day, they do according to the former manner. They do not fear the Lord, and they do not follow the statutes or the rule of the law of the commandment that the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel. In other words, Jehovah God at this point in time, in this place, in what used to be the northern kingdom, was just another god to all those people. Again, these are all the reasons why the Samaritans were such hated people by the time of Jesus, by the Orthodox Jews of the day.
They were just, I don't want to use this word, but it seems fitting. They were almost like mongrel.
Yes.
A mongrel culture to what they thought that the Jews should be.
Yes.
So
now, were they all that way? Apparently not. Yeah. but there were so few who tried to stay devoted to Jehovah and tried to believe that Jehovah was the one true God, that creator of the universe, creator of everything, creator of all the little g gods. There were so few.
You get the idea when you start reading in the New Testament, those dirty Samaritans, Samaritans, that they were considered unclean.
Yes.
And,
because they had, as you used the word mongrel, they had been mongrelized by the people that the Assyrians had moved into those towns and cities.
And intermarried, and all that was part of it. So yeah.
Because remember, the Bible uses the phrase the poorest of the poor. Well, they were the ones with the least amount of power.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to have any cultural movement at all, you would try to make a deal with this one or make a deal with that one to give your daughter in marriage and that sort of thing.
So I mean, we can just quickly hit the fact that Jesus, when he went with his disciples, they thought surely he was going to go around Samaria. He was not going to go to Samaria.
Well,
they couldn't believe he was going to go to Samaria.
Well, and now you see the background for why the Samaritans were so hated, so despised, so ostracized, and the feeling was mutual, because the people who I'm trying to remember, we covered something 2 weeks ago, and I don't remember what it was, but we made the point clear that around the Sea of Galilee, it was such a mixed area there of not just Samaritans, in what used to be the Northern Kingdom, but you had out and out Gentile cities, because remember, Tyre and Sidon are right there on the Mediterranean coast, just northwest of there, and those people moved eastward toward the Sea of Galilee, because it only makes sense. I mean, there was a vacuum here when the scribes, the smart people, the merchants, the wealthy people of the Northern Kingdom, when they were hauled off to Assyria, it left quite a vacuum. Mm-hmm. And so as long as you weren't going to buck the Assyrians, you pretty much could do whatever you wanted to. And that's why there was such a heavy mixture of Gentiles and Jews by the time Jesus came along in and around the area of the Sea of Galilee. Now, I'm going to remind y'all of this particular slide. Do y'all remember when we studied this? We covered the Exodus, this particular inscription that was found. Our bound servitude had lingered. Moses then provoked astonishment. It is a year of astonishment because of the lady.
The lady.
And who is the lady?
Hathor.
The cow goddess Hathor. Yes. This was in the area of the mining of the turquoise mines in southern Sinai. And how many people even know this exists? How many people even know that this is the proof that the Hebrews, they were pagan? That's why they had so much trouble from the time they were brought out of Egypt. Why they've had so much trouble. The first sign of anything that caused them to doubt, what did they do? They reverted back to their pagan ways, in spite of all that Jehovah God had done for them. So anyway, I wanted y'all to remember that, because that's just a reminder of the Jeroboam. Back when he started the Northern Kingdom separate from Rehoboam after Solomon died, this is what he had that was to his advantage. And so when he told the Hebrews in the Northern Kingdom, and set up those two golden calves, he said, these are the gods that brought you out of Egypt. It was all fitting together. It was all tying together. Hezekiah. 2 Kings 18. Let's see. Did y'all know this? Did y'all know the bronze serpent that was raised up in the desert?
We talked about this a while back.
Yeah. Well, it survived.
They had begun to actually worship
They gave it a
coal.
name even. They even
Yeah.
gave it a name.
They set it up and worshiped it, and that was not what God did that for. So, yeah.
Nope. But the
So
name
Hezekiah was
Nehushtan,
the one that we covered this, way back, but Hezekiah is the one who actually destroyed it, right?
yes, yes.
He broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the children of Israel burned incense to it and called it Nushatan.
And that was the name literally means bronze serpent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're running out of time, so I was going to try to hurry you along a little bit.
Okay. Right here is where I wanted to bring up the point about the video that we sent out as homework. Very informative about the city of Lachish, and why it was important is because when Sennacherib basically attacked and defeated almost all of the fortified cities of Israel, and the main one that he went back and bragged about, if you watched the video, was the fall of Lachish. Well, was Lachish the capital city of Israel? I mean, of Judah? No.
No.
Was Lachish the most prominent city of Judah? No, it wasn't. Why? And he's not, just like all the old ancient kings and rulers, they didn't like it to be broadcast where they screwed up or they messed up or they didn't, win every battle. So he wasn't going to admit that. Let's see, it's on the next page. He wasn't going to admit that an angel of Jehovah killed 185,000 of his soldiers one night while he was trying to besiege the city of Jerusalem. There you go, 2 Kings 19. Oh my gosh. And that point was made in the video that we sent you, that we asked you to watch for homework. Hezekiah, this is Sennacherib's prison. And there's actually, and y'all may not know this, but there's actually 3 copies of it. They were constructed. There's almost no differences between the 3 of them. And from the oldest to the newest, it's only like a 16-month period of time difference as far as any scientist can figure out. One of them is in Israel. One of them is in, I can't remember, the British Museum.
Sennacherib, just to everybody, was the king of Assyria, and he wanted to memorialize his victory and had at least 3 copies made, is basically what
He
this
made
is.
3 copies of it.
Mhm.
And in it, he says, Hezekiah, I made a prisoner in Jerusalem, his royal residence, like a bird in a cage. Well, yeah, he did. But God protected Hezekiah and kept him in power and kept the kingdom from falling. Now, how many of you know this is in the Bible? In those days, Hezekiah was sick and near death. Isaiah the prophet, son of Amoz, went to him and said to him, Thus says the Lord, set your house in order, for you shall die and not live. Well, Hezekiah wept bitterly. He was so distraught.
Turned his face to the wall. I'm not sure what the
Lord,
significance of that was.
And he told Isaiah, return and tell Hezekiah, the leader of my people, thus says the Lord, the God of David your father, I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Surely I will heal you. On the 3rd day you shall go up to the house of the Lord, and I will add to your days 15 years. I will deliver you and this city from the hand of the king of Assyria, and I will defend this city for my own sake and for the sake of my servant David. Then Isaiah said, take a lump of figs. So they took and laid it on the boil, and he recovered. Apparently Hezekiah was probably had turned septic from an infected boil, and it was killing him. And Hezekiah said to Isaiah, what is the sign that the Lord will heal me and that I shall go up to the house of the Lord the third day? Then Isaiah said, well, this is the sign to you from the Lord, that the Lord will do the thing which he has spoken. Shall the shadow go forward or shall it go backward? And in the King James and New King James and a few other versions, it uses the phrase 10 degrees. The word for the actual word there used is ma'alah, which means steps or paces. And so it's go forward 10 steps or go backward 10 steps. And Hezekiah said, well, it's an easy thing for the shadow to go forward 10 degrees, but let the shadow go backwards 10 degrees. And again, this is New King James. So Isaiah the prophet cried out to the Lord, and he brought the shadow 10 degrees backwards by which it had gone down on the sundial. And again, it's the literal words are meaning steps or stairway. So on the stairway of Ahaz, the sun could go forward 10 steps or go backward 10 steps. And Hezekiah said, well, going forward would be easy.
That's natural.
I want my sign to be that the sun goes backwards. And guess what? It went backwards. How many of you knew that was in your Bible before tonight?
Keith, we're at an hour and 16 minutes. What you thinking?
Well,
I know Manasseh's one of the ones I wanted to get to. Super evil. He's another one that is mentioned often in the scriptures. He did as much evil as Manasseh, is to compare to him. That
and don't forget, he was a southern king. He was a king, one of the kings of Judah,
and he reigned for 55 years. So there was plenty of time for him to do great evil. And he even set a carved image of Asherah that he had made in the house of the Lord. I mean, you don't get much worse than that.
He made his son pass through the fire.
Yep, he sacrificed, human sacrifice. Mm-hmm. All that. It's really bad. Let's go through Josiah, a godly king. He made major reforms, recommitted the kingdom to the book of the law. As a matter of fact, I think this is where they find the book, isn't it?
Yes.
They find the book of the law,
How many of you knew the scroll of the Torah had been misplaced? How many of you
forgotten,
knew that?
Forgotten and just stuck in there somewhere, and they find it and say, look, this is what we're supposed to be doing here. He tore his clothes. He was upset. And so Josiah was considered one of the better kings during that time.
Yep.
He made some major reforms to bring out of the temple of the Lord all the articles that were made for Baal and Asherah and for all the host of heaven. And he burned them outside of Jerusalem in the fields, and he carried their ashes to Bethel. So, I mean, he did tear down a lot of the things. He tore down the ritual booths of the perverted persons that were in the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the wooden image. I'm not even sure what that is all about. No, can you tell me?
That's temple prostitutes.
Okay. Wove hangings for the wooden image. What's that?
That's putting robes on the phallic symbols for Asherah.
Oh, gosh. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, and you remember when in prior passages we said where people sold themselves in service of
to do evil.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was
sold themselves to do evil.
They were temple prostitutes, male and female temple prostitutes.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And all of this was going on in Jehovah's temple.
Yep.
That's what's so bad about it.
It says that no man might make his son or daughter pass through the fire to Molech. That means human sacrifice of children.
And do you know where the valley of the Hinnom Valley is? It's one of the valleys right next to the wall of Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
You remember Jerusalem surrounded by 3 valleys.
Right, right.
The valley of Hinnom is one of them. Okay.
I'm moving you along here.
That's okay. Here is the Babylonian Empire. It was centered in Babylon, it overthrew the Assyrian kingdom, and now you can see where it says Median Empire to the right.
Mm.
Well, that's the part where some of the Hebrews who were taken out of the northern kingdom, some of them were dispatched all the way over that far east. That was what I was referring to earlier. But the northern kingdom, remember, was defeated and carried away by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom, kingdom of Judah, was defeated by the Babylonians and were
200 years
carried to
later.
Babylon.
Yeah.
100,
Two,
well, not 200. It was like 100. It was like 120 years
was it?
between the two
Okay.
exiles.
All righty. Oh,
And that's it.
discuss. We've discussed everything. We're not allowed to discuss anymore. But I think that the thing that just struck me is how merciful God is that he still was willing to send a redeemer.
And how long
After
suffering he was in their present time
yeah,
before he sends the Redeemer.
yeah.
I mean, my
I mean,
goodness.
just something. And I do know that there were good kings. There were periods of having somewhat decent kings, but they never rooted out that that root of paganism that had invaded everybody from Egypt, basically.
Well,
That I just don't think they
remember,
could ever really shake that. And you and I talked about this. What was the allure? What was the allure of pagan gods? And we talked about that possibly all that we can really figure out, this is not scriptural, this is just us talking, but the instant gratification of it, maybe that they number one, that these little g gods were real and had some sort of power to do things. And say a woman was infertile, rather than taking God's answer, maybe she didn't have a baby. Maybe she was still infertile. They would rather go and make some kind of sacrifice and feel like they were doing something toward bringing that around to an available pagan idol. God was so adamant about not making any kind of idols about him.
mhm.
And they turn to that so often. How is that what we're doing now? Turning to the
Well,
things where we think we have some control over what we want, what we desire, what our flesh wants, you know.
and I'm agreeing with you. I think that was the main driving force. It was always his driving force.
Mhm.
What were the five I wills that Satan committed? I will ascend to the high place. I will sit on the throne of the Most High. I will, and I can't remember where they're found, but there's five I wills right in a row that God said that's why Satan received his judgment,
Mhm.
because he committed those five I wills. And um, it's always a case of they want to think about it. They want to distract us from Jehovah. They want to cut us off from Jehovah. They want to confuse us about Jehovah.
Well, they want to stand in the place of.
That
They
was
want
that
they
was the
want to
very last thing I was getting to, is they
yeah.
want to replace Jehovah.
Mhm. And were willing to make themselves accessible, and there must have been something that the people were actually, getting out of a lot of that, because they continued to do it. So they thought that it was doing them some good.
Yeah. Well, y'all, if y'all have any questions about any particular thing in the book of First Kings or Second Kings, we're um, we hope we gave you a good overview. We hope we pulled out some very important details out of First and Second Kings, and then next Sunday, uh, if you, Snar and I have an idea of where we're going to go, but if you would like to help us decide or encourage us, let us know what you think. Where do you want to go after 1st and 2nd Kings? So
I hope that we drove home the sins of Jeroboam.
Yeah.
And that the first 2 commandments of the 10 commandments is God demanding that he be our God and have no other gods before him.
He's serious.
And these people, that was the sins of all these kings. This is the root of all the sins, is these things that they worshiped, these little g gods that they worshiped. And if you don't believe all that's alive and well today, go on eBay or
Etsy,
any of it.
Yeah.
And that's all there for you to partake. And it's just scary. And also how they wanted to incorporate the worship of all these gods.
Everybody, come on. Everybody's welcome.
Everybody's welcome. It don't matter who you worship, your higher power.
We'll take all of
you
you
know,
in. Yeah.
You can all come in the temple and everybody just put your money right here and come on in. You're all welcome. And we embrace everybody in love and kumbaya. God does not allow that. That's not allowed.
And that's another good point. I mean, how many of you before tonight knew that the temple, Solomon's temple, had been so desecrated in these years between Solomon and the fall of the southern kingdom, the fall of Judah?
Yeah.
Because remember, Jerusalem was always in the southern kingdom. How many of you knew that the actual temple, Solomon's temple, where God said he was putting his name, was so desecrated to the extent that you found out it was desecrated tonight?
And, when you hear all these things put together, you don't have to wonder anymore why God turned his face away from them and let them all be taken off into captivity.
Yeah.
I mean, what you'd really expect would be him to destroy them off the face of the earth. But he had made a promise and he had made covenants that said that would endure forever. And so in his mercy and keeping his covenants, he didn't destroy them all.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know we've done enough.
Yep. All right. Well, we love everybody. Keep praying for us. Thank y'all for joining us tonight. We had a little bit of a crowd, so welcome back. And we'll see y'all next Sunday night.
Bye-bye, everybody.